So I heard him going to the tables before ours, and I'm like, okay. And I had this internal dialogue with my brain. Sometimes me and my brain, we chat about things, and my brain's going, okay, Vinny, listen up. And I'm like, I'm listening, man. He goes, pay attention here. You've got one shot to ask him something intelligent, right? You already feel like you don't belong here. This is your one moment to ask him something that makes you look good. And I'm like, okay, I've got this brain. I've got this. He goes, okay, right, I'm going to come up with some ideas. I'm going to give those to you. But before we could do anything, he came to the table and said, oh, have you got any questions? And I just blurted out,
hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, I'm joined by Vince Warnock, and Vince is an award-winning business and marketing strategist, coach, author, and host of the Chasing the Insights podcast. An ex-radio announcer with over 20 years in marketing, Vince has been recognized by his peers with numerous awards, including being named a Fearless 50, a program designed to recognize the top 50 marketers in the world who are driving bold, fearless marketing and digital transformation. He has also founded multiple companies, including Chasing the Insights podcast and Academy, where he empowers entrepreneurs and business owners to make sense of marketing and grow their business so that they have the business they have always dreamed of. Welcome, Vince.
oh, thank you so much for having me, Jacob. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So the main thing that I kind of wanted to bring you on the show for, which I think is really, really cool, is the fact that you talk about something called imposter syndrome. So
Yes.
if you want to just kind of start by talking about that, I think that would be awesome.
Sure. Well, probably the best way to start that off is to tell everyone how uncomfortable I felt with my bio being read. And I think we all have felt that at some point. So essentially, imposter syndrome. It's actually the technical name for it is imposter complex because it's not actually a syndrome, but unfortunately, most of the world knows it as imposter syndrome, so we just keep calling it that. But it is something that happens to us where we feel like we don't deserve the recognition that we have, or that we feel like we're going to get exposed. And you could feel this in the corporate environment. You could feel this in the entrepreneurial environment. I still recall feeling this multiple times in corporate where you're always worried that, the CEO is going to find out you have no idea what you're doing, or your peers are going to call you out on something, and I don't have all the answers. And it would be a feeling essentially that would cause you to act differently than you normally would. And by that, I mean, it causes you to self-sabotage. Because you
Yeah.
would go through this situation of going, I'm worried about being exposed, therefore I'm going to hold back on actually delivering something, or I'm not going to do this because if I do it, people might know that I have no idea what I'm doing. So this is this kind of thing, and I've encountered this multiple times through my life. In fact, most of my life. And actually, I've kind of figured out, Jacob, this is going to be something I think I'll have to deal with all of my life. And if you look at the research, you'll understand why. There's a huge amount of research out talking about who is most susceptible to imposter syndrome, what it does to you, and all these kind of things. And they very early on discovered that around 72% of the population at some point in their life have dealt with imposter complex or imposter syndrome. Now, if you then isolate that down into, break those stats down into just the entrepreneurs, I'm pretty sure it'll be 99%, with that 1% being the sociopaths, which, we don't worry about them so much at the moment. They've got everything sorted. So it very much skews towards anybody who's outside of their comfort zone. It skews very heavily towards women, because women have always been in a society that that's kind of stifles their voice. So there's this fear of, if you put yourself out there, you'll be told to shut up, which is what used to happen in the old days. And from what I hear, still sometimes happens today, which makes me angry. But anyway, but also if you are what's called a first gener. So this is somebody who you're the first in your family to go to university. You're the first in your family to create your own business, to succeed, to take on investment funding, all these different things. If you're the first to go there, often that sense of imposterness, that sense of fraud will kind of take over you. And then anybody in the tech space, particularly in the digital marketing space, because there's absolutely no way that you can keep up with all the change that happens. Honestly, particularly in digital marketing, I'm speaking as a digital marketer, honestly, the rate of change on things is phenomenal. I still remember I would create these list of different specs that we needed for all of our vendors. So if we were doing a video, for example, these are the different aspect ratios, these are the different frame rates, everything that we need for the different platforms. I had to modify that list. And within a 5-week period, I modified it 7 times because Facebook kept changing the ideal aspect ratio that many times in that little time is just insane. So you're never going to keep up. And it's one of the things I've had to teach people as they come on board my team is don't even pretend, don't even try to keep up with everything because it's impossible. So just do what you need to do and be the best you. So that's kind of something I've dealt with. I still remember, oh man, I've got so many stories about this, Jacob. So I still remember the first time I kind of really understood a little bit about this. And that was going back to when I was quite young. I wanted to be like, I used to watch a lot of movies and TV. That was my escapism, and read comic books, but that's a different thing. So these movies and TVs, you would see these kind of executives in these corporate jobs and be like, oh my goodness, these guys have the best job ever. They'd have a corner office. They'd have all the whiskey sitting on a tray there, Mad Men style. And they would just get to go out to meetings and have these amazing lunch and come up with these ideas. And that's what I want. I was like, right, that's going to be me one day. And I grew up in a very different environment. I grew up in poverty. I grew up in abuse. I didn't have access, I felt, to any of this. And then one day I won tickets to this business breakfast, and I was super psyched, man. Because I was poor, so anywhere where there's free breakfast was going to make me happy. But also, I got to hear from the head of Adobe for Oceania, and I'm a huge Adobe fanboy, or what I was back in the day. Photoshop 2 had just come out. I was super psyched. I'm like, oh man, you can do so much creativity with all this. It's going to be amazing. So I won this ticket, and I was like, right, if I'm going to this, it's going to be full of all these corporates in these amazing suits. So I need a suit, and I didn't own a suit. So I went down to a secondhand shop, what we call an op shop. I went down there and I was like, right, okay, what's the cheapest suit that they have? And the only one I could afford was a $10 suit. And it was, oh my goodness, it was disgusting. It was double-breasted. It was like shiny light gray. I can't stress how horrible this suit is enough. It was shiny and it was ill-fitting. Like, honestly, the sleeves went down to my first kind of knuckles there. It was so bad and very ill-fitting and very poor looking suit. Plus I had long hair tied back in a ponytail because, just stressing, back then that was kind of cool. Okay, just putting that out there. So I turned up to this event in this ill-fitting suit. I didn't even know how to tie a tie. I just kind of tied a knot and put it around my neck, my hair and ponytail. And I felt like a complete and utter outsider. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here, man? Like, I sat at this table, and in my mind, picture, this is my kind of interpretation of what I saw. But in my mind, everyone around that table was around 40 years old. They're all male. They all wore Armani suits. Now, they probably didn't, but that's how I picture it in my mind. Like, everyone just looked like they had their life sorted. They looked immaculate. They looked like they belonged to be there. And I definitely did not. And I thought, well, I'm going to make the most of this anyway. So I grabbed my notepad and pen, scoffed down a whole heap of food, and was thinking, how can I sneak more food out of here as well? I had my coffee, and I started listening to the speaker. And he was amazing. He was so inspirational. He was talking about his journey through his career and all this. And I was like, man, this is what I want. And he just seemed to have this life that was incredible. Like, he was this inspiring speaker. Everybody there was paying attention to him. He was immaculately dressed. He had the coolest stories. His company car was an Audi. I'm like, oh man, I want to be this guy. Like, I want his life. This would be amazing. So he got to the end. I wrote pages of notes, like seriously, just pages and pages of notes. And he got to the end of the speech, and he decided he was going to go around each of the tables and just ask them if they had any questions. So I heard him going to the tables before ours, and I'm like, okay. And I had this internal dialogue with my brain. Sometimes me and my brain, we chat about things, and my brain's going, okay, Vinny, listen up. And I'm like, I'm listening, man. He goes, pay attention here. You've got one shot to ask him something intelligent, right? You already feel like you don't belong here. This is your one moment to ask him something that makes you look good. And I'm like, okay, I've got this brain. I've got this. He goes, okay, right, I'm going to come up with some ideas. I'm going to give those to you. But before we could do anything, he came to the table and said, oh, have you got any questions? And I just blurted out, at what point did you know you'd made it? And my brain just went, dude, like, seriously, I'm out of here. You're a moron. and the entire table, you can picture this atmosphere, man. The entire table around me, they all kind of, I don't know if they actually snickered at all, but it felt like it. It felt like they all kind of looked down their nose at me, and I felt I wanted to run, like, no joke. I wanted to get up and just run out of the room. I felt so embarrassed and so bad. But his response really surprised me. He turned around and he said, actually, that's a very good question. And the entire table, you almost heard the like audible pause where everyone went, hmm? And in my mind, my brain was about to head out the door, and it just goes, wait, what? And I was like, okay. And he goes, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Now, the moment somebody that you want to be like says, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, you pay attention. So I grab my pen, grab my paper. I'm writing down every single word out of this man's mouth. And he said, I'm going to let you in on a secret. I'm going to let you know my morning routine. Now, we had all heard that morning routines make success. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. So I wrote down everybody. He goes, every morning I deliberately wake up early. I'm like, deliberately? I like this. Wrote it down. He goes, I go to the bathroom. I'm like, bathroom, bold choice. Okay, not kitchen, not bad, bathroom. He goes, I fill up the sink with cold water. And I'm like, cold water. I wrote it down. I almost asked him what temperature water. Like I was that invested in this story. And he goes, I fill up the sink with cold water. I splash that water on my face. I look in the mirror and I say, ha, today's the day they find out you're a fraud. And the entire table just went, what? And he goes, Vince, I've never felt like I've made it. I always feel like an outsider. I always feel like I don't belong. I have to remind myself that I deserve to be here, that I'm good at what I do. And I was like, oh, and like it just spoke so directly to me. And he knew, like, he was a very smart man. He knew straight away that that's exactly what I was feeling right then and there. But then he did something else and he goes, most of us feel that way. And he kind of indicated around the table. And then I turned to the table and I looked at these guys who, in my mind, like I said, were wearing Armani suits. They got their entire lives sorted. They were these pinnacle of business. And I suddenly saw them all in an incredibly different light, where they were all nodding because he said, most of us feel that way. And they're all like, yep, yep. And I suddenly realized all of these people were just as insecure as I was. All of these people felt the same way that I did in that moment, that they don't belong there. So it made me realize two things. Number one, it made me realize empathy towards other people a lot more, because I realized most of us are in the same boat there. But the second thing it made me realize is I've got as much right to be at this table as all of them. If we're all feeling that insecurity, then I have as much right to be here as all of them. So that was my kind of awakening. I'd love to say that then solved all problems with imposter syndrome and ta-da, I'm completely healed. Never had that come up again. But no, of course, it didn't happen that way. But it's been something that through my entire life, my entire career, both in entrepreneurship and in corporate life, has in some ways crippled me in different situations. But I've kind of come to the point now where I'm like, yes, it's there. It's going to be there. But I got a very different take now. I'm not allowing it to self-sabotage me anymore. And that's kind of what I've learned through my life.
Nice. And, when you tell me that story about the suit, it makes me think about like when I went to like some early interviews, like for jobs when I just got out of university, I was the kind of person who I'd never even owned a suit in my entire life. And here I am like 20, 22. I'm like, I got to go get the nicest suit possible because the suit is what's going to get me the job. Yeah. And I remember I just went and I bought one off the rack. I think it was at like Sears or something, just like a cheapy suit. It was like $40 because it was on clearance. And I was like, this is all I can afford. And I remember going to the interview, and you know how suits have those little like strings on like the cufflinks and like at the back. Yeah. Well, no, I didn't know about these. So I went into the interview and the guy's like, did you just buy that suit? I was like, no, I've had this suit for ages now. He's like, oh, well, you never took the strings out. And I was like, oh my, I was like, come on. I was like, well, I didn't know about that. Yeah. And, and it just makes me think about your story of like trying to impress everyone by like, making yourself look better or feel better or dress like the way you think that everyone else is going to be.
Yeah. And keyword there is think as well. I really like that because often, and like I said, my projection of all the different people that were at that table where they have their whole lives sorted. And this happens so many times in my life where you'll have one of your heroes or one of the people you look up to and you're like, well, obviously they have everything sussed, they're very successful, money just comes to them, opportunities just come to them. Obviously everything's perfect in their life until you actually meet them, you sit down with them and you realize we're all hot messes. Like seriously, these people don't have their life sorted. Like half of them are struggling as much as we are. They may have more money than you. They may have more exposure or some more opportunities, but also they may be more experienced than you. So yeah, often it's what we think of them, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. And because I know a few like highly successful people who have, boatloads of money and all this kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
you'd never be able to tell it from just meeting them, right? Like maybe you know, maybe you meet them on the street, or maybe you see them in the grocery store. And like the crazy thing is, like, people put like really highly wealthy people on, it's almost like this weird like pedestal. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
well, if I just earn a lot of money, my life will be set. But and it's such a cliche thing to say, but like money doesn't buy happiness. It just, money just enhances the good of the person that you are. And that's the way I
I love
think,
that.
right? Like if you're a good person, the more money you have, the more good you're going to do. If
Yeah.
you're a bad person, the more money you have, maybe you'll be a little bit more corrupt with the money that you have.
Yeah.
um but
Also, if you're an
I
insanely
feel,
unhappy person, then money's probably going to make you more unhappy.
yeah, because you're just going to keep trying to fill that void, right? Like
Yeah.
happiness comes from within. And like if you're not happy with yourself, I don't think you're ever going to be happy on the outside world. And no amount of money can make that difference.
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
Another thing that really kind of caught my attention when you're telling that story was it made me think back to high school, right? Like I grew up similar to you. Like I didn't have any abuse, but I was, I didn't grow up in a super wealthy family.
Yeah.
Um, and I was that kid who wore the same pair of pants for the entire week because I only had two. So I was like on
Yep.
rotation. It's like, okay, week one, I'm wearing these like gray tearaway pants, like back when I was in high school, these gray tearaway pants, and then swapping it out with like sweatpants the next week because I never wore jeans.
Yep.
And I remember the one day in like drama class, like my tearaways like split in half, like right up the crotch. And I was like, oh, good Lord, there goes my pair of pants. Like now
Yeah.
I'm only down to one. And I just kept thinking, like, man, how do these people buy all these nice clothes? Like, I just wish I could be like them. Like, I just
Oh
wish I
man.
could be like the cool kids and
Yeah.
have, like the designer jeans, or, have like I think it was like Rockaway pants or something. Like, I don't even know what they were, but I just remember like growing up thinking, like, I just wish I
Yeah.
had all this stuff. And I was so unhappy with my life. And I kept feeling like I needed to change who I was
Yeah.
in order to become, more likable, to be more cool, to be more, authentic. And in reality, I was just, I had that imposter complex.
Yeah.
And, that was something that carried through my whole life. Like now I don't give a crap like what people think about me. I'm just going to be me, and I'm just going to do what I want to do because I want to do it.
I love it. And just to clarify,
Um,
you and I would have been friends at high school for sure.
yeah, yeah,
the
for
the
sure.
two guys
I
with
would,
only a pair of pants between them, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. And now one thing that's kind of dramatically changed, and I see it all the time, and I laugh when I scroll through like my Instagram or like my TikTok or anything, is all these people who are trying to, I guess the word is like flex that they have all this wealth and flex that they have all this stuff going on. Maybe, the way they pose their body to make it look like they're stronger and stuff. Now, how do you feel that social media has impacted this imposter complex, and has it made it worse?
I think so. And the reason I think that is because we are now more visual than ever before. And I was going to say in the olden days, my son keeps telling me that when I grew up, it was all black and white. He's a cheeky. But back when I was younger, we didn't have social media, obviously. So
Mhm.
we lived in a world where you hung out with your sphere. So there was a little bit more acceptable within that sphere when you're friends with them and they get to see you every day. So you get to see them every day, warts and all. One pair of pants and all, like you get to understand them a little bit better. But then also it's when you're exposed to situations where you're uncomfortable. So new audiences, new people, you go to a new event, you go to somewhere where you meet different people. That's when you feel exposed, you feel vulnerable, you feel imposter syndrome or imposter complex kicking in. Now with social media, that is pretty much all the time. Because when you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook and things, that you're not just visible to your collection of people. And by the way, in our days, our collection of people were like, what, 10, maybe 20 people max. Now you've got, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people all connected with you on social media. So suddenly that feeling of not belonging, that feeling of being an imposter, being kind of outside of your comfort zone, that is amplified even more. So what happens is you put this veneer on, you put this kind of social version of yourself on. So every photo's got to be perfect. Every photo's got to tell a story. Every picture's got to show how wonderful your life is. In fact, I remember I used to work with this woman. She was incredible, like super talented woman. I won't name her because it'll embarrass her. But super talented. But she also was one of these people that had everything. Like you looked at, she was beautiful. Her husband was beautiful. He was an overachiever as well. Like he was an author. He was a humanitarian. He was nominated for New Zealander of the Year. I'm like, what a jerk. I mean, like just a great guy. They're kids. They're these kids that are just like, well, I'll be honest, most people's babies, unless they're your own baby, most people's babies are actually pretty ugly. I'm sorry to tell you this, right? But most people's babies are ugly. But their kids were these like picture perfect little kids. And you're like, oh, come on. Surely there's a flaw there somewhere, you know? And you'd be in the work environment and situations would happen and she was just unflappable. Like, you know, super stress would happen or something would fall apart, a deadline wouldn't be met. And she's like, hey, it's all good. And you're like, okay, so you feel a little bit intimidated by her because she has everything sorted. Anyway, she moved on to another organization. I was moving on from Cigna. And we got to the point where it was like, right, I hadn't seen her in a while. I was running a marathon or half marathon. And she was at that event. And I thought, oh my goodness, I get to catch up with her. I haven't seen her in ages. But I missed her. And I'm like, oh, damn. Like, you know, she came looking for me, but I wasn't there. So I was leaving the event and I looked and in the distance I could see her at the entranceway and I'm like, yes. So I ran over to say hi, give her a hug and see how she is. And I went up and I was, how's things? And she just burst into tears. She was standing there with her two kids and she just started sobbing. She said, I'm having a really crap day. She goes, the kids are being brats. I just had a fight with my husband. I'm worried about my job. I'm blah, blah. Now, outwardly, of course, I'm empathetic. I'm like, hey, come on, you know, give her a hug and it's going to be okay. You know, it's just you go through this today, tomorrow's going to be a different day, blah, blah, blah. But on the inside, I was going, yes. Oh my goodness, she's human. Oh, I love it. Because you have projected all this stuff onto her going, she is this perfect person. But in reality, she's just as just as troubled as all of us. She has good days, she has bad days. She has days where the kids who are picture perfect are just little brats. So it made me look at her Instagram very differently because every photo on Instagram looked like, you know, one of those Instagram influencers. You're like, come on. So I think anyway, so we put on this veneer, we put on this outward persona that we have our life sorted, that we have more money than we do, we have better cars than we do, better relationships than we do. We don't show the vulnerable or the true aspect of ourselves. So it's definitely amplified.
Yeah. And that actually makes me think, I think it was last year or the year before, I was walking into work and I saw these two beautiful McLaren cars outside of the hospital
nice.
where I was going into. And I was like, oh my God, that's like my dream car. Like, I just love the way they look. It's not so much about the power, it's about like the way they look. Like they're just like driving pieces of artwork. Like they definitely have the power, but like, if you ask me like what's under the hood, I'd be like, I don't know. It's just a beautiful car. And I remember I was there and it made me laugh because everyone was just around there, like taking pictures of them. Right.
Yeah.
But me being the outgoing kind of person I am, I walked up to the person driving it and I said, hey man, how did you get it? Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I noticed you have a camera. Can you take my picture of me sitting in it? And he's like, yeah, he's like, I just got them from the dealership. Like they're just letting us drive them around for a little bit. We're taking some kids driving and stuff in that, you know, give them the experience. Right. And he's like, yeah, I'll take your picture. And I was like, great. And he's like a professional photographer, I find out. And I was like, this is amazing. So now I'm getting a professional picture of me in like my dream car, like, you know, a $350,000 car. I was like, yes. But it made me think because everyone around there was just like looking and thinking like, wow, I wish I could be that guy, instead of knowing the full story. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, like, I posted that picture on my Instagram, or I posted it somewhere after, and I was like, yeah, you know, driving this awesome car. And people were like, wow, I wish I could be you. I wish I could have that kind of car. And I was like, that's not even mine. Like, I just had the balls to go up and ask this person what he does, how he got this car, and if he would take my picture in it. Right. Yeah. So Instagram doesn't always tell the full truth. And social media doesn't always tell the full truth.
I would argue it very rarely tells the full truth. That's the problem. Yeah,
rarely.
Oh man, you see it in the entrepreneurial space, you know, with There are so
Mhm.
many people out there going, I made X figures in, 10 days. I made Y figures in 20 days. I made all these bold claims. And yet, if you follow the patterns of what they're doing, if you watch their behavior, watch their things, there's a desperation that kicks in at certain points, which if you peel that back, you realize means, despite the fact that they're talking about how cash rich they are, how much, income and revenue and profit they're making, the reality is they're struggling because they're doing these flash sales, and you only do flash sales when you want a quick cash injection. So why are you doing that? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong with needing a cash injection. Nothing wrong with struggling financially, even, like there is a way through it. But to project this kind of outward persona of, oh yeah, dollar bills, y'all, everywhere, and then you suddenly realize most of those are actually real bills where you've got to pay a bill, not actually dollar
Yeah.
bills. So yeah.
So I'm just thinking, because like I have a big community of like fitness people now.
Yeah.
And how would you say that in terms of looking at imposter complex, when people look at health and fitness, right? Like I feel
Mm.
like the world's shifting almost in a way, and I know I'm not going to get a lot of love for this, but it's shifting in a way that's kind of praising overweight people. And it's praising the way that, like love your body the way it is.
Yeah.
But, that gets to a point where it's just at an unhealthy level. So how would you say, in terms of, looking at imposter complex and looking at the two sides of the spectrum, right? Like there's the
Yeah.
one side where you see these bodybuilders, these women and these men who are super lean, super strong. And, the part of your brain says, I should really look like that. But then there's the other side where you have the mainstream media and you have all these advertisements coming in saying, love your body for who you are. Be as, I'm not going to use the word fat, but be as overweight as you want to be, and,
Yeah.
embrace, that side of you. How do you kind of determine, because like our brains naturally go toward thinking, like we're constantly thinking about like, man, I should improve this area of my life. I should look like this. I should be like that person.
Yeah.
Our brain is just constantly going like this. So what advice would you give to that person to say like, okay, where do you find that balance, and how do you find who to role model
Yeah.
versus, just kind of trying to be like that person?
Wow, that's such an interesting question, man. I'm going to bring it back to marketing for a moment, because
Sure.
everything I do is marketing. But because in so much of what you said there, I'm going to say I have issue with, but I don't have issue with what you're saying. What I mean is, you're right. Like I look at the two extremes there. I look at the extreme of love your body, despite how unhealthy you may be, versus look like me. I've got the six pack. I've got the whatever. Which, let's face it, I'm never going to get a six pack. I'm actually okay with that. I'm never going to get one. There's one buried deep down in there, but I'm not that structure. I'm not designed that way. Even, to be honest, in my younger days, I was obsessed with martial arts for a period of my life where I would train every single day. And I was at peak fitness. I've never been at that fitness level again. Like, honestly, I could run a marathon. I could do anything, and it would feel fine. Yeah. But I still
Mhm.
didn't have a six pack. And it was so frustrating because I used to train with these two brothers who, if we went to a pool and they took their shirt off, doctors there would be running over going, oh, so that's what that muscle is. I've never seen it. Like, it's ludicrous how like defined they were compared to me. And I trained harder and more than they did. So anyway, that was a little therapy there for me. So I have a problem with both of those sides of the spectrum. And a lot of that problem is in marketing. So what's happened is the love your body no matter what is a knee-jerk reaction to the whole, if you don't look like this, you're unworthy. And both of those are actually really unhealthy, right? Loving yourself to the point where, or trying to push yourself to the point where you have to look like somebody else, you have to obsess over it, which leads to eating disorders, which leads to all these other different things as well.
Yeah.
That is incredibly dangerous, and that's not a healthy space for people. Versus the other side of it, which is, just, I don't care. I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm just going to love my body. And, oh, what happened? I just had a heart attack,
Yeah.
So, and that's because all of that is focused on one thing, which is how you look rather than how you feel or your
Mhm.
healthiness, like how healthy you actually are. Because I've realized at my age, I exercise a lot, but I don't exercise to look a specific way. I'm actually relatively comfortable with how I am. I exercise because I like the feeling that I have when I'm healthy, when I don't get puffed running up a flight of stairs, or, like when I'm walking down the road to the supermarket, I don't suddenly go, sometimes I may do that. But I love that sense of feeling like you are healthy, feeling like you can breathe easier, and just, it makes you feel good. Like you genuinely feel good about yourself. So I think that is the problem. There is this marketing aspect, which goes, it's about how you look at one extreme or how you look at the other extreme, rather than what are you actually doing to yourself. And I think for a lot of the fitness coaches and things like that, that's where they should be focused. They should be focused on, actually, look, you aren't necessarily going to look like someone who's got a six-pack. You may, if you're designed that way, and I'll help you to get there if that's the case. But the reality is, it's not about that. It's about you being comfortable with who you are, and I'll help you to feel very comfortable with who you are. I will help you also to feel like every day you wake up and breathe in and you just feel good, like your body feels good, your lungs feel alive, your muscles feel great, that kind of thing. So I think that for me is, I'll bring it all back to marketing, but that's what I would do as fitness coaches. I would focus on that middle area of how you're feeling. And actually, because you've got to look at what the results are, the results that people want are. You've got to look at actually what they want. Why would they work with a fitness coach? There are some that would work because it's unhealthy. They would work towards, like I said, getting that body that they're never going to attain because they feel so depressed about themselves or whatever. That's unhealthy. But there's others there that go, I want a fitness coach because I find it really hard to discipline myself. And I love the feeling when I'm feeling fit, when I'm feeling healthy, and I might drop a couple of sizes and fit those jeans I haven't fit for ages. But the reality is I feel good about myself. That's why you use a fitness coach, to motivate you to get to that point.
Yeah, I think that's a super good point, because, for me, like at the beginning of COVID, I was about 30 pounds heavier than I am right now. But I started finding that through exercise, diet. I kind of went the opposite direction. I was like, okay, I have COVID, like I don't have COVID, but I have this opportunity right now where I'm stuck at home. I can either sit around and watch Netflix and eat a bunch of ice cream and all this stuff, or I can just test and see what happens if I, move my body 3 times a week. What happens if I go for a walk? What happens if I start, lifting weights? And the crazy thing about exercise is, like, once you start to see some results, it's almost like it's addictive, right? It's like, oh, okay, wow, my pants are fitting a little bit better. Well, now I have more than one pair of pants, but my pants are starting to fit better. Like my shirts are starting to feel a little bit tighter around my arms. Like, this is good. People are starting to notice. And, one thing I always tell people is that fitness, lifting weights and stuff is great. Cardio is great, but the majority of how you feel and how you look is done in the kitchen. Right? Like, it's what you eat, it's what you put into your body, right? Like, you ever wonder why you feel so crappy after you eat a bag of chips? Because it's not designed to make you feel good. It's designed to just hit that little dopamine reactor in your brain to say, like, yes, this is making me feel good at the moment, but after you feel like crap. So that's a big, go ahead.
I was just going to say, man, so we went through, my wife, about 4 years ago, I think it was, 3-4 years, I'm losing track of all the concept of time at the moment. Anyway, a while ago, my wife came to me and said, look, she wants to cut all refined sugars, flours, basically go to a kind of raw diet, not so much paleo, but a clean eating. And she goes, are you going to do this with me? And I'm like, cut sugar? Are you insane? Like, what is wrong with you, woman? But I thought, you know what? I always support her, so I'm going to do this. And in my mind, I thought this was going to be insanely difficult, because I've got a sweet tooth. I'm more a savory guy, but I have a sweet tooth, and I eat a lot of lollies and a lot of biscuits and things. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this though. I'm going to cut sugar. It's going to be hard, but I'm very competitive with myself, so I'll make this work. I did not realize how good you felt when you cut sugar from your life.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Like, and it was so quick to kick in as well. I suddenly felt like all the brain fog lifted, I felt clearer. I felt sharper. I felt like I could do a lot more. I was like, why aren't people telling me this? They probably are, but I wasn't listening. But why isn't this more well known? I'd tell everybody else, cut sugar, you're going to feel great. And they'll look at me and go, are you insane? No. So I'm fully on board with that. Honestly, I lost 18 kg.
Nice.
Over there. I don't know what that is in pounds, but I lost 18 kg over a period of about, I think, 3 months, about 6 months, I think it was. because I was getting bigger and bigger. I was under a lot of anxiety and stress in the role that I was in at the time, and that resulted in not enough time to exercise. And not enough time to prepare good meals. In my mind, that's what I thought. So I would just eat whatever. And throughout the day, when you're feeling that stress, you would stress eat. So I'd eat comfort food, which for me is pies. Oh man, I love pies. So I would just comfort eat all of these. And yeah, I was 18 kg heavier than what I am now, which is insane.
Yeah, I totally get that, because like even when I was in my last position, it was a stressful environment.
Yeah.
And you know, there was always treats around. Like if you're here in Canada, we have Timbits, and they're, I guess like in America, they call them donut holes. They're like little miniature, like little donut balls, right?
Yeah.
And like there would always be like a 40 pack on the desk behind me, and I would just demolish like 3/4 of that thing in an afternoon, right?
3/4, man. I would have done the whole thing.
I was trying to restrain myself. I was like, well, I have to share with the other employees here. I'll just grab one after each customer, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it was just like filling that need, and like going to McDonald's, going to all these places, and just like, oh, I'll just grab an ice cream after. Why not? Like I'm on my lunch. Who cares? And just and then it's just like the pounds just started racking up. And like you said, like with sugar, like once I started cutting it out, like I still do have sugar today. Like I just don't have as much of it, right?
Yeah.
Like now I've probably cut my sugar intake down by about 90%. So even just doing that, just try it for a week. If you're watching this, just try cutting your sugar even by 50% for a week, and you'll notice a difference, and you'll want to cut even more of it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Now, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's maybe stuck in an imposter complex loop, right? Like they feel like they constantly have to keep being like someone else to feel better. How would you help them break that cycle?
Okay, well, this is it's not really a controversial view, but it's a very different view. But it's very, very much what I believe, which is embrace imposter syndrome. We're going to change the narrative around this. And what I mean by that is don't embrace the self-sabotage aspects that come with it, but embrace the fact that you have it. And there's a reason for this, okay? First of all, when you have imposter syndrome, like I said, you realize that most other people have it as well. So you've got as much right to be in the room as they do. So just picture that in your mind. But the other aspect there is when you're doing something different, when you are putting yourself out there, when you're trying to build a business, when you're trying to get more customers on board, when you're trying to learn something new, do something new, you step outside your comfort zone, right? We all know that growth doesn't happen when you're comfortable. It doesn't happen in that comfort zone. It happens when you step outside of there and when you're pushing yourself to do something different. Imposter syndrome, when you understand what it is basically a self-protection mechanism from your brain. So your brain is going, whoa, 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 Vince, what are you doing, man? Or whoa, Jacob, you are way outside of your comfort zone now. Come back. You're an imposter. They're going to find you out. Quickly scurry back into the safe zone here. Scurry back where you're protected. So your brain is just trying to protect you, and it knows that fear is a really good motivator to get you back in that comfort zone. Now, the thing is, as I said, growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. Growth only happens when you're out there, when you're in that new space. So that is exactly where you need to be. Particularly if you're an entrepreneur, you need to be consistently outside of your comfort zone. So you're going to be fighting with your brain there because your brain's going to be trying to pull you back. So that's your opportunity to go, okay, I'm outside my comfort zone. I'm feeling imposter syndrome. That means I'm exactly where I need to be right now. And use imposter syndrome as a way to let you know that you are growing, that you are doing something different, that you are creating something new, that you're outside of your comfort zone. So when imposter syndrome kicks in now, I try to refuse. I say try to refuse because I don't always succeed in this, and you're going to make mistakes. It's going to hit you sometimes because, as I say, imposter syndrome sometimes whispers in your ear, and sometimes it shouts at you and gets its claws into your brain and goes no, and it'll cause you to sabotage yourself, to procrastinate trying something, to procrastinate contacting their client because they may think less of you, or it'll cause you to not finish something, or it'll cause you to in my case, when I published my first book, imposter syndrome got a hold of me. And that's one of those moments where it wasn't just a whisper, it wasn't even a shout, it was like claws in my brain. I remember I had a book launch And I was like, okay, someone said to me, don't do book launches. No one turns up to them anymore. And I'm like, ha, ha, ha. Oh, you amateur fool. I'm a marketer. This is my job. I'm going to fill this room. And I did. I got 100 people there.
Nice.
This is pre-COVID, obviously, when you can meet people.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. It was an incredible atmosphere. Everyone was so supportive and wonderful. And in my mind, I knew I was going to have to sign copies of the book, which is weird because, why would anyone want my autograph? I'm not a celebrity, barely average karaoke singer. This is just going to get awkward, but I could rationalize it. I mean, if I go to a book launch, that's what I would ask for. That's what I would want. It's my way to support them, but it's also kind of cool. You got a signed copy of a book. It means the author. Woo. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And the thing that I hadn't prepared myself for, though, was every time I signed the book and handed it to them, they would all say something along the lines of, oh, this is exciting. I can't wait to read it. And every time I heard those words, my stomach would knot. And I was like, oh my goodness, I hadn't actually thought about the fact that people are going to read this book, which means they're going to be able to judge me. They're going to be able to critique it. They're going to be, what have I done? And I went to bed that night. Now, I'm a high extrovert. Being around 100 people and being the center of attention with 100 people, oh my goodness, that should have been the best feeling ever. But I went to bed that night, couldn't sleep, and I just had these internal conversations going over and over in my brain saying, who the hell do you think you are to write a book? What makes you think you've got anything special to say? Or people are going to read this and think, what an amateur, Vince, what an amateur. So the next day I decided I'm not really going to talk about the book anymore. I didn't want to talk about it. It was too difficult. And I sabotaged myself. I thought, right, I'm really busy. I was the chief marketing officer at Cigna at the time. And we were full on. We were buying another company, which is the same size of ours, bringing them together. It's a huge project. So I was run ragged anyway. So I had Forbes, Diginomica, and CIO magazine all say, hey, we want to do a big spread on your book. And I was like,
Wow.
Sorry, guys, I'm really busy at the moment. And that's the only thing I regret is I turned them down. And that was the sabotage piece. So every now and then, even I fall prey to that, even though I'm aware of it, I understand it. But the key for me is whenever you're feeling that imposter syndrome is recognizing that's where you're meant to be. It's then telling your brain, it's going, hey, brain, it's okay. I understand. And thank you for looking out for me. Thank you for trying to protect me and trying to pull me back into the safe space. But you know what? I've actually got this. I know what I'm doing here. Yes, I haven't done this before. Yes, it's kind of scary and kind of new, but what's the worst going to happen? We're going to be okay. So brain, you just take imposter syndrome, put it over in the corner there, let it have a nana nap or let it sit in fetal position. I don't care, but I don't need that right now. That's not for me. So you get to choose how to respond to those feelings that are kicking in there. And the way I choose to respond to those is to go, this is the indication that I'm exactly where I need to be right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like a big part of that too is the repetition.
Yeah.
Like the first time you go and do it, it's probably not going to go as good as you hoped. But the more often you do something, the more comfortable you get to doing it. Like when I first started public speaking, I was petrified. Like I remember I went to my first Toastmaster meeting. I had my piece of paper like this and I was like shaking. My mouth was so dry. I couldn't even get the words out. But after a few months, I was up there on the competition stage, right? Like I just had like tremendous confidence going up there because I kept doing it over and over and over again. And if you can find a support group, right? Like if you can find a group of people, a group of friends, a group of mentors that are there to help support you, that imposter syndrome is also going to be minimized as well, because you have people bringing you up and lifting you to that level of saying, keep going, you can do it.
Absolutely. And they give you perspective as well. I'm a huge advocate for get yourself a coach, get yourself a mentor. You really need that. And for every successful person, even, the likes of Amazon. Wow, I've gone blank on his name. The Amazon guy, you know who I'm talking about.
Bezos.
Yeah, that's it. Bezos. Even Bezos has mentors. He has coaches as well. You just need those people in your life because they do a few things. Number one, they fill the gaps that you don't have, right? So if there's an area that you're not strong on, they can teach you that. But also they'll highlight your blind spots to you. So those areas where, like, for example, self-sabotage, if you're not aware that you're sabotaging yourself, they can highlight that to you and make you aware of it. But the other thing is on those days, and if you're an entrepreneur, you would guarantee to have these days where you wake up and go, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? I need to go get a real job. Am I an idiot? Like, this is super stressful. I don't want to get out of bed anymore. We all have those days. And having a coach or a mentor will be the person that basically says, okay, look at this, Vince. Because often when you're feeling this, when you're feeling that kind of, I can't do this, it means that the evidence and your perception are misaligned. So all the evidence of how you're doing at the moment, like where you've come from, how much you've achieved, all those kind of things is over here. But way over here is my thoughts and my feelings about where I am right now. So what they do is they align the two. They go like, look at the evidence, Vince, have a look at this and remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. So they provide that perspective. In fact, that's probably my other biggest piece of advice to anybody who's trying to push through imposter complex or imposter syndrome is you really do have to remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you're an entrepreneur, it's guaranteed you're not just doing this for yourself, you're doing this for the people that you serve. So one of the things I teach in my program is I teach people to, they create what's called a cookie jar list. And I totally stole this from David Goggins. He's this ultra marathon runner, like machine that just, like, if you're in the fitness space, you probably know of him anyway. The guy's a living legend. But he has this concept called the cookie jar, and he's a little bit different from what I'm prescribing. But basically the concept is you need to fill this jar with your accomplishments, with your successes, with the things you've learned, all these different things. So what I do is I get people to write down a list of everybody that they've impacted, every client that they've sold something to, every client they've got results from. Write down their name, write down what it is that they had, like the challenge that they had, and write down the outcome after working with you. And then what you do is you keep this list. This becomes your cookie jar list. I don't recommend, you can put it in an actual cookie jar. I don't recommend printing it out and putting it on the wall like I used to do, because I have clients come over and it's a little bit awkward when they look at that. It looks really vain. So I now put it into a Trello board. And on those mornings where you're going, I can't do this, I'm really struggling, or imposter syndrome is going, shh, you just keep quiet right now, Vince. You're in you don't deserve to be here. I go back to that Trello board and go, it's not about me. Because when you look at that, it gives you perspective and you go, okay, I've actually achieved all of this. I've helped so many different people here. So yes, I do know what I'm doing. So imposter syndrome, you can shut up right now. But the other thing it does is it makes you realize, if I don't turn up, and particularly with fitness coaches and things as well, guys, health and fitness coaches, if you don't turn up, then you are denying somebody access to their health, or denying somebody access to breakthrough in their fitness. So suddenly when it's not about you, when it's about somebody else, it's a lot easier to deal with. I talk about perspective a lot, because what happens is, if we're looking at imposter syndrome, if we're taking on board imposter syndrome or self-doubt or any of those kind of things, we're effectively in a little bubble and we're looking inwards and we're going, this is how I'm feeling. This is how I'm thinking right now. And we're focused and we're fixated on that. But way over there, down the hallway, there is your clients. There is the people that you're here to serve. And when you focus your eyes on them, and you're focused on getting results for them and reminding yourself that they are why you're doing what you're doing, then your vision is then focused further on, which means everything that's in your direct vicinity here, so all the self-doubt and imposter syndrome, now becomes blurry. It now, because you're not focused on it, it's in your periphery vision now, so it doesn't hold as much power for you. So I get people to write this cookie jar method down. With the way David Goggins explains it, because he did his first, I can't remember the full story, but he wanted to do this run to raise money. He's an ex-military guy. He'd never run a marathon in his life, barely, like he does a lot of marching and things like that. But he decided he was going to run the event to raise money for a charity for soldiers' families. But they said, you don't qualify for it. You've got to have done like 4 marathons. So he's like, oh, well, it's coming up really fast, and there's an ultra marathon on like next week or something ridiculous, which is 4 marathons in a row. I'll just run that and then I'll qualify. So he did. And it turns out, I mean, let's be straight. He is a very fit guy. He's a soldier. He's used to actually having a fitness regime. So he ran the first marathon and then thought, well, that's actually quite hard, and kept going. I think he got to the halfway point. I don't remember the exact points. He got to the halfway point and he was suddenly like, okay, this is really hard. Like his body was wanting to shut down. His brain's wanting to shut down. He got 3/4 of the way through and sat there crying and going, I can't even move. My legs won't move. My body won't move. I can't do this. But he remembered thinking, which is bizarre because I've broken through so many barriers in my life. I've achieved so much. And when he reminded himself of that, he suddenly found, wait a minute, what just happened? A little bit of energy came back to me. And then he reminded himself of something else that he had accomplished and a bit more energy. And then in the end, he could stand up and he put one foot in front of the other and he can keep pressing in and pressing in. So he talks about this concept of pull these things out of your cookie jar or pull them out of your Trello board. Remind yourself why you're doing it, and it'll energize you and it'll keep you walking to where you need to get to.
I love that. I think that's actually a great way to end here too. So Vince, if people are trying to connect with you, how can they reach you? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Oh man, I make it super easy. Yeah, just go to chasingtheinsights.com. So that's the home of my podcast. It's also the home of my book, and my new upcoming books will be on there shortly. But also you can find out information about my group program. If you're an entrepreneur who doesn't understand marketing or is getting really frustrated by marketing or just finding it difficult to differentiate, then I've got a 3-month accelerator program, which will help people to understand all of that mess and to help them to scale upwards and outwards, which is really exciting, getting some amazing results with the people I work with. So there you'll find out about that, but also you'll find links to my Facebook group and my social channels. I'm always online, guys. I very rarely sleep. I only sleep 4 hours a night. So, and I love helping people. So if you've got any, you want to follow up on anything we've talked about here, or you have any marketing challenges and things like that, just reach out. Reach out to me on social. I always jump on a Zoom call with someone, chat with you, and see if I can help you in some way.
Amazing. And I'll make sure to put links in the description below, so that way you guys can easily access Vince's website. Now, Vince, one thing I like to ask everyone at the end, if you could give one piece of advice that would reach every single person in the world, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh my goodness. Actually, that one's easier than I thought. Be curious. And I mean, be insanely curious. And I genuinely think that curiosity, like you think about it, when you were born, when you're a little child, what's the most common things you hear kids say? Why? Why is the sky blue, Dad? Why is the grass green? Why is that man fat? You're like, dude, seriously, don't say that out loud. Really embarrassing moment on a train, by the way. But why is this? Why is that? They're just so curious about everything. They're like sponges. But over time, we get that beaten out of us, right? Yeah. Suddenly we think to ourselves, well, if I ask those questions and the really obvious questions, then people might judge me different. They might look down on me, or they might think I don't know as much as I do. So we kind of stifle it a bit, and we just go through life going, okay, I'll ask questions every now and then, but really I'm just, you lose that curiosity factor. Now there's a problem with that. Curiosity is, I genuinely believe curiosity is an answer to a lot of the issues we have in the world at the moment. Because when you become really curious about something, it is really hard to judge it. And I'll give you a good example of this. This is something that happened to me that I'm not entirely proud of, but I'm proud of what I've learned from this situation. As I said, I grew up in abuse. I grew up in an abusive household, in poverty. For me, school was a happy place. It was a place I could escape to, where I was free to learn things. I was free to be curious, all these different things. So it was my safe place. But then I got to age 10, or age 11 rather. So we're at age 10, we finished primary school. Over here in New Zealand, we have a thing called intermediate. It's 2 years, age 11 and 12. It's kind of like a transitional school between your primary school and then going off to what you guys would call high school, we call college. So I went to intermediate, and I was like, right, I'm 11 years old. That's going to be great. And I discovered something at school that I had never encountered before, which is a bully. So all of a sudden I had a bully at home, and I had a bully in the school environment. And for 2 years, this bully made my life hell. I had no safe space whatsoever. I was incredibly vulnerable, I became quite insular. I actually, funny enough, it was the one thing that drove me to be an entrepreneur, because I needed to escape a lot of this. So I just found ways to make money at age 11. I was like, right, I set up a pirated video game ring for the old Commodore 64. Now, to clarify, I did not know it was wrong at the time. I had no moral compass and no parents that could guide me in this way. But it was hell for 2 years. And then we got to age 13. I went off to a college called Warnock College, but he went to a separate college. He went to Porirua, and I was like, yes, I'm free. This is going to be amazing. And I did have a couple of bullies from time to time, but nothing to that level. But I also decided at that point I didn't want to be a victim. I was sick of being a victim to everybody else's abuse. I wanted to learn how to defend myself. So I threw myself into martial arts. And I learned from third form, so age 13 up until age 17, I was just training nonstop. And then the unthinkable happened. Age 17, my last year at high school, and he got transferred to our school. And I'm like, okay, I've watched every cheesy 80s movie. I know exactly how this goes, man. I'm the underdog. I'm the guy that was picked on, the nerd, and the nerd's going to come out on top, and the bully's going to be defeated, and the audience will cheer, and we will all feel great about life. So I saw him there, and I was like, haha. So I yelled his name and yelled an expletive, and in his usual style, he turned around, he trundles over, took a swing at me, but this time it didn't connect. I'm like, haha. Took another swing. I moved out the way again. I'm like, ha ha ha. It's just like the movies. And then bam, I laid him out and he was out cold on the ground. And instead of feeling great, I didn't feel very good at all. And I'm like, wait, I thought I was going to feel really awesome. I've been waiting for this moment since I was, age 12. What's going on here? Next thing you know, I'm in the principal's office, and, because when you fight, that's where you end up.
Yeah.
And the principal pulled me aside and he said, look, Vince, do you know why he got transferred to this school? And I was like, I don't care, because, I'm a staunch 17-year-old and I'm feeling very vulnerable. So I don't care. And he goes, well, you should care. I went, oh. And he goes, he got transferred here because for all of his life, his father had abused him and his sister and his mother, like beaten them every single day, to the point where recently his father beat the mother so badly in front of the 2 kids that she passed away. So both of these kids actually witnessed their dad murder their mum. Now, the father had been arrested. He'd gone off to jail. And the kids were then taken into the care of an auntie and uncle. And they were closer to the college that we were at, or the high school we were at. So he got transferred over here. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. He goes, no, I don't expect you to know that. But of all the people that could possibly have understood him and what he's been through and could have been there for him, I thought it would have been you. And I had this revelation that I was not the good guy in this story. I was the bad guy. And by the way, anyone who watches those 80s movies where the underdog comes out on top by beating the bully, that's not a good thing. Somebody still gets abused. Like, seriously, we're going to stop putting those movies out there on pedestals. It's like, no. But I realized I had no idea what was going on in his life. I had no idea what he was going through. And all he needed, well, I don't know if it was all he needed, but he needed somebody to reach out to him and say, hey, I've been through that. I know what it's like to grow up in that environment, but there is a way through. So I determined at that point, I was going to get insanely curious about people. I was going to understand what motivates them, what drives them, why they behave the way they do. It's a lesson that both my wife and I taught our kids. They've grown up to be amazing human beings, but it was something really important to me that they don't just judge something based on what happens. They try to look at what's behind the thing. They try and look at what's behind the way people behave. And I genuinely do think as a society, if we get really curious about other people, about why they think the way they do, or about what they believe, we will then be able to show empathy. We will be able to understand them, because someone has a different political view of you than you. In this day and age, what we do is we go, well, they're obviously wrong. I'm right. They're evil. I'm good. So therefore, I'm not going to talk to them. I'm just going to hate on them. How can you hate that person? You've never met that person.
Yeah.
Right. You can't hate somebody you have never met before. You can hate the actions that they do if it's damaging other people, but you can't hate that person. Understand that person. Find out why they believe what they believe, because often behind that is pain, but often behind that is scars, is insecurities, is all these different doubts that you also suffer from. So I just genuinely believe we need to get insanely curious about everyone else. It'll make the world an incredibly good place.
Yeah. Vince, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. Guys, if you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Check out the links in the description below, so that way you can connect with Vince. And if you guys really like this, comment below as well. Maybe we'll bring him back on the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.